I love books, and in 2020, books have been one of the things that have helped me get through this particularly rough year. In a time dedicated to isolation and introspection, reading has provided solace, allowing me to spend days when there was otherwise very little to do within the lives and minds of others. I want to share with you 6 of my favorite books that I read this year, many of which I think you've probably never heard of, and tell you why they were so important to me. Let's get started. The first is a strange book I came across called Human as Media by Andrei Miroshnichenko. This is something that I'm pretty sure I'll be thinking about and referring to for years to come. And the crazy thing is that nobody has really heard of it. It's insane to me. The main concept of human as media is that there's been several evolutions in mankind that have helped further distribute knowledge and create freedom of ideas through the transformation of how we make and consume media. The first evolution was the invention of oral language. The second was the invention of the written word. The third was the invention of the printing press. And the fourth was the invention of the internet. This fourth evolution is still playing out, which means that we're currently living through one of the most important shifts ever. Where the past evolutions emancipated writing and reading, the internet is emancipating authorship and allowing anyone, including me right now, to distribute thoughts to you. When you really think about it, you realize how remarkable this is. Though there have been over 100 billion people to have ever lived, only a few 100 million people have actually been able to publish their ideas and spread them beyond their communities. Until now. I think about all of the wisdom that's been lost to time, the village elders and the philosophers who've had incredible ideas and beliefs that were simply never spread beyond their immediate circle of followers. It's a huge shift that we aren't fully cognizant of because it just feels normal. The thoughts within this book are in the upper echelon of big ideas that my brain thinks about constantly. When talking with people about the future of creativity, I often reference the same things over and over, like Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans essay, and now I'll be referencing this right alongside them. The second book is How to Take Smart Notes by Sunka Ahrens. This book, combined with Rome research, completely changed my life, and I'm going to tell you why. The book starts by saying that everyone is a writer. Even if you don't think of yourself as a writer, you're writing all the time. But the problem that most people run into is they don't know how to start writing when they're faced with a blank page. This is where writer's block comes in. You're sitting there and you want to write, but you don't know where to start. This book makes an amazing case for taking smart notes that are written so well and so effortlessly that you never need to deal with the idea of a blank page again. Good writing comes from good note-taking, and if you take good notes, then you set yourself up to essentially have a rough draft of anything you want to write about sitting there in your note collection. This book didn't just help me take better notes, it helped me actually do something with them. In fact, every video that I've ever made on this channel is thanks to the smart notes that I've taken. I've tried all types of ways to capture information from podcasts and books and lectures in the past, yet every time I did so, I never actually had the desire to go back and look at the notes after I took them. Smart notes are about capturing thoughts that interest you, written in the way that you think instead of just copying sentences word for word, and then building a collection in a way that lets you think when it's time to actually get to work. If you're interested in this type of note-taking, I made an entire video about the concepts in this book, and you should give it a watch. The third book is called Creative Thinking by John Bennett, and it's another obscure book, much like Human as Media, that I enjoyed partially because I'd never heard of it before and never found anyone else who had either. I found this through Michael Ashcroft, who's been making some great YouTube videos as of late. You should definitely check him out, and it instantly became one of my favorites. The book is a series of transcribed lectures from the 1960s on the subject of letting yourself be creative. And the book begins by setting the conditions for creative thinking, and I just love the way that the author frames this. Here's what he says. To do good creative thinking, you must find a subject that you care deeply about, ground yourself in the material, create an environment where spontaneous insights can arise, and then have a skill or technique to capture that moment of spontaneous insight, and then translate it for the rest of the world to witness. This author constantly hammers home the idea that you have to make space for the spontaneous, saying that what we typically call thinking isn't thinking at all, it's more like understanding. And real thinking is something we rarely notice, consider, or make time for. I loved reading this book, and I found it very helpful in unlocking some new methods of being creative. I highly recommend it. The fourth book is called Because Internet by an author named Gretchen McCulloch. This is a really charming book that I discovered thanks to Twitter. I've been following the author there for some time. McCulloch is a linguist who's fascinated by the way that language changes due to evolutions in how we're communicating on digital platforms. As more and more of our conversations move from in-person dialogue to iMessage and Instagram DMs, new habits are forming. And this book is just full of tons of examples of this type of behavior. But my favorite is her description of keyboard mashing. We use a series of letters to communicate when we're frustrated or shocked. But even though this looks like an arbitrary series of letters, there's a method to them that our brain understands. It turns out that those letters are mashed in a sequence that's pretty important. This looks more correct than this because we all type on the same type of keyboards. And so the letters we mash really should be the same every time and all contain A, S, D, and F. But in recent years, this is evolving, and the way that you'll see a keyboard mash now communicated somewhere like TikTok is actually through a repetition of letters S and K. Why did this change? Well, touchscreen keyboards are the reason. The S and K fall right underneath your thumbs, so this is the easiest way to keyboard mash while texting. This book is full of strange ideas like this that I would have just never taken the time to consider, and it's written really well. To pick up on the habits of the internet, take a look at this book. The fifth book is Leonardo Da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. I love a good biography, and this one instantly became one of my favorites. Isaacson is a master biographer, and his other books on Steve Jobs and Benjamin Franklin have had a huge impact on me in the past. This book is incredible, giving me insight not only into Leonardo da Vinci's life, but his way of thinking. Leonardo's genius was a culmination of several factors which set him apart from other thinkers. He had this relentless curiosity about everything around him, an insatiable thirst for knowledge that was satisfied whether he came to a conclusion or not, and a sense of childlike wonder that allowed him to ask questions like, why is the sky blue? And how do woodpeckers not give themselves concussions? These traits were paired with others that we would typically think of as negative, but really made him the genius that he was. He had this distractible nature which led him to connect ideas as he moved from one passion to the next, and a tendency to procrastinate, which allowed his best works like the Mona Lisa to be refined for decades and become the masterpieces we see them as today. I think we have a lot to learn from Leonardo da Vinci, and if you want to know what I mean by that, give this video a watch. My final book is fiction, The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling by Ted Chiang. This is actually just a short story within a larger book of short stories, but I appreciated it so much that I'm pulling it out so I can talk about it here. This is a modern science fiction classic by an author who you probably know best because of the film Arrival, which is based on another one of his stories. The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling extrapolates out into a future where every single second of our lives is being recorded, and each of those seconds is instantly searchable and replayable with ease. Where other authors have explored this concept at a really dystopian level, Chiang uses this device to explore how this type of tech might impact relationships and families. What if you could go back and replay all of the arguments that you've ever had with a loved one? What unexpected realizations might you uncover? I won't say any more because the delight is in just reading this story, and it's so short that you can finish it in a single sitting. Even if you're not big on fiction, give it a try. So those are my favorite books from 2020. If any of the ideas interested you, I encourage you, give them a read. And if you do, let me know what you think in the comments or over on Twitter. And if you had any books that really impacted you this year, feel free to send them my way. Though 2021 will hopefully be less isolated than this past year has been for us all, I still have plenty of reading ahead. Thanks for watching.